It is very difficult to be a cult classic and intentionally be a cult classic. Usually, a cult classic, there was some kind of flaw with it, or some kind of negative connotation, and then eventually it got its audience or something like that. With this movie, it intentionally wanted to be a cult classic. It got it and stayed.
Yeah, it's less about the film being bad and more about the film being great at what it is, but just so unlike anything that was being done at the time.
Yes.
I think it maybe falls under that so good, but we don't know it yet.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing about this film. We're talking about Alex Cox's first film,
Yep.
Repo Man. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and some great content up there. We're just going to put some new content up there as well. And an opportunity to give a pick of what movies we'll review in the future with, of course, a shout out about you as well. Hit a like and subscribe. Tell your friends about the show. It's a little thing you can do, but it's a big help for us. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Checked out the webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about the cult classic from 1984, Repo Man.
Yeah. Punk youth Otto loses his job at the supermarket and quickly finds himself working as a repo man with the elderly mentor Bud. As Otto learns the ins and outs of repossessing cars, he gets closer and closer to rival agents, conspiracy theorists, and a Chevy Malibu with something quite deadly in the trunk.
Now, it's a long process of getting this film made. I think Alex Cox was in college at UCLA, round up a bunch of friends, and it was kind of more or less a idea. They knew somebody that knew Michael Nesmith. I kind of watched the same kind of commentary from our DVD. If you get the DVD, there's a great interview with Alex Cox and producer Peter McCarthy, and they're talking about the production of it. And they knew once they get Michael Nesmith of the Monkees on board, it would be a lot easier to attract production, studio, get the wheels going.
Well, because the film had such a punk aesthetic to it, it had a musical aesthetic to it.
Yeah.
Getting a music maker as a producer on your film is not inherently a bad idea. No. And Nesmith had been producing several films at that point, and
yeah, he kind of started.
Like he almost would have had just a career as a producer that would have been quite strong, even if he hadn't been in the Monkees. So,
and it was a good pick because he's one of those origins of producing music videos that eventually will begin in the evolution of MTV. He started late '70s of producing music videos for LPs. And eventually that evolved in the 80s. If you had an album, you had to make a music video.
Yeah, and Alex Cox, of course, you mentioned his two friends of his that he kind of grouped up with. They were both basically not making movies anymore. They'd started the production house to make movies, ended up just mostly doing commercials and B-roll basically for other bigger pictures. And it wasn't until he kind of like gave them this, I would say, gem of an idea, but not like a fully formed anything, that they decided to make what was called Edge City Productions. Edge City was the name of Alex Cox's short film that he had basically failed to make a feature prior to this, and so he cut it down to like 36 minutes and released it as this very confusing short film called Edge City. So it kind of began that steamroll appearance basically of finally getting a feature done.
And it's also the gimmick of generic brands of products in the movie. You can kind of get into philosophical reasons of why it's in the movie, but for them, they just wanted product placements, and when they didn't achieve it, they fine, we'll just do this in generic stuff all over the place. So it's kind of this little gag of they wanted product placement search, they never really got it. So then what was the natural place punk rock answer is fine, everything's generic.
Well, there's some funny stories behind that too, because the only product placement they were actually able to get was the little trees that hang over your mirror. Yeah, the air fresheners, and that's why you see them in every single vehicle, regardless of if it would be there or wouldn't be there. It's hanging there anyway. Yeah. I like the idea that there was a bunch of Ralph stores in LA that were going through their old product and throwing away expired stuff right when the producers came looking for a general store that they could use. And Ralph's didn't have a lot of big advertising like what you would have like today. Like every Target you're in, you know it's a Target. Ralph's didn't have that as much. So they kind of were able to be the supermarket and also donate a lot of the expired goods to the production in order to kind of help boost what was going on. This is a movie where a lot of great choices were made on the cheap, and a lot of luck was had on the cheap.
Right, because the car was stolen and actually found. They got another car.
Yeah.
They found 3M paint to make it fluorescent at the end. It's not a 3D. It's actually, they really did a fluorescent paint job.
Although that was expensive. That was like $600 for a
Yeah.
tub of it, so that might have been the most expensive thing in the entire production.
The producer, Peter McCarthy, said he was branching out to get Harry Dean Stanton, and the agent actually said, no, you want Mick Jagger for this if it's music. And they're like, no, we need somebody like Harry Dean Stanton, this salty, crusty kind of a character, not so much as kind of a what would Mick Jagger would bring, kind of a jazzy. You're not understanding the aesthetic, but we want this crusty kind of a Repo Man person who gives up the codes and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny, the agent was like, no, you want this guy, not Harry Dean Stanton.
It's a little too on the nose to go with Mick Jagger, and it might be too distracting as well. I found, when you kind of make a movie about a specific kind of music, and then you place all the people in front of it that would be, not exactly that music, but it would be so distracting to have. I also like too that when Cox was writing the film, he also thought of Dennis Hopper, but Dennis Hopper was going through a lot of, I guess,
things,
not very likable characteristics in his career at that point, and people like, we can't really trust him to show up to set, and we don't have enough money to reshoot with someone else if he decides not to show up. So.
Well, then in that point, with the interview, Alex Cox says there was a lot of times we got friction with Harry Dean Stanton. There's times we fired him on set. There's a scene where Cy Richardson is shooting the gun, and Harry Dean Stanton is supposed to be on set for that, and then a lot of the friction, they just said, go home. We just had enough of you. So there's a lot of friction. It didn't go smoothly when you wanted Harry Dean Stanton, and he was the marquee name for this movie. Everybody else was kind of fresh-faced, and a lot of inexperience. A lot of people that were kind of like Tracy Walter, who got a lot of recognition after this movie, who was just bouncing around from film to film. Emilio Estevez was just starting out, and then you have like Fox Harris, who was the producer, who go on to do other films with Alex Cox. Not the producer, the professor, the guy with the thing in the trunk.
Well, when you have that too, when you have all these different variations too, because it seems like when you watch the interview with Cox, it's placed a little bit on Stanton, but from the stories I read, there also could have been some, I'm new in filmmaking and I want to have my stamp be my stamp on Alex Cox, because it's funny that he was so entrenched in allowing his actors to improv through the scenes. In fact, a number of the scenes don't look anything like their scripted versions because he allowed them to improv so much, including the ending. But then you have a case where he got mad at Harry Dean Stanton he was going to do the scene where he shows him how to park the car afterwards, and he used sports signals, baseball signals, to try and show him how to like get the car parked. And Cox has notoriously hated sports, and he got really pissed off and yelled at Stanton about. It's like take the time when you need to actually make a win. Let this actor do what he wants to do. He's famous for a reason.
Yeah. Cinematographer, boy, if you want a cinematographer for your first film, you really nailed it with Robbie Mueller. He came to L.A. from back with Wim Wenders. When Wim Wenders in the early 80s started making Hollywood movies, he was doing a lot of films with Wim Wenders. Robbie Mueller will go on to do a lot of films with Jim Jarmusch. He did a fantastic horror movie with Martin Sheen, Emilio Estevez's dad, The Believers. He did cinematography for that. If you haven't seen that out, check that out. And also, he would, after this movie, will go to cinematography for one we just talked about, To Live and Die in L.A.
Yeah, and I believe in that episode I had said, I really like the cinematography in this movie, but I think my favorite is still Repo Man. So here we are.
Here we are, yeah, because I think after we talked about To Live and Die in L.A. and we got my engine one, I was trying to hold off to like maybe next year talk about this because it would obviously be 40 years, but I can't wait.
It's not like we're like holding out for copies. We both have the Criterion edition of the film, so.
One for Best Supporting Actor for Saturn Awards for Tracy Walter, got nominated for Best Director for Alex Cox. Tracy Walter, if you didn't know him, you also see him in the '89 movie Batman. He was part of Joker's crew, the photographer for this. Afterwards, it's kind of Alex Cox didn't really get the home run the success from this first movie afterwards.
Yeah, I know he did. He did Sid and Nancy, which was a pretty sizable hit at the time.
Yeah.
But then there was also this Western called was it Walker? I think a Western called Walker that came out, and I think that one was kind of like well received enough, but not extremely popular. And then he's kind of just slimmed down. The other big thing that he did that a lot of people don't think about is he did write the screenplay for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So he's definitely was still percolating with that kind of style.
It's
years
very
later.
that Gonzo he likes that.
Yeah.
The Fear Loathing has it very much where Hunter S. Thompson invented Gonzo journalism, but the script I could understand Alex Cox in that.
Well, you have a Gonzo screenplay there and a Gonzo director behind the camera with that one too.
Interesting footnote: Harry Dean Stanton and would go on to do a short film with, I think it was another person from this film. They did a short film for David Lynch, was A Cowboy and the Frenchman.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I can't remember. There was another person. Tracy Walter and Harry Dean Stanton would go on to do a short film for David Lynch a couple years after Blue Velvet. I think it came out in '88. It was a short called The Cowboy and the Frenchman. So if you can find it, I don't know. It's difficult to find. David Lynch is not really likes to overly share his short films. He likes to keep them in film festival circuits.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. The one thing I always bless about Criterion, it's just with this edition as well, is they have fantastic bonus features. So if you're looking for David Lynch stuff, find his Criterion films. There's a good number on there. But
of course, it's got David Lynch, Tracy Walter, and Harry Dean Stanton. It's a dynamite already.
Yeah, the other title was probably Three Men Going Insane for a little while.
All right. So if you get the kind of how jumbled it is to get it made, it's interesting how jumbled this kind of the product is.
Well, yeah, and I think part of it was...
And we'll get to my review in a minute.
You've got a studio like Universal who got behind the film. They got behind it with what's called a negative pickup, basically meaning they will tell you how much money that they will purchase the film from you when it's done, but you're not getting a dime from them until the film's done. So you still have to make your own money, but then you have to take the money from Universal to pay the investors when the film is actually given over. So they didn't believe in the film enough to throw any money down initially, and then they also got really skeptical about its film's commercial appeal, and so they virtually lowered all the marketing down to almost nothing. It sounds like the film only was in theaters for about a week before it was pulled from most theaters.
I remember being on regular television for late night screenings, probably like 86 and 85. I'm a network we'd only had 4 channels, but network television was on there, and I remember seeing I just remember what am I watching?
Yeah. And the film was known. One of the ways in which it kind of gained that cult status was as well because of the television version of the film.
Rental.
Because they on TV they filmed several versions of the script to get rid of the F-bombs
glad you brought it up.
And they put some really ludicrous changes in there almost to let you know that this was supposed to be a swear word and we just couldn't do it. The film also had a very vocal defense from Roger Ebert, who said it was one of the best films of 1984. It's so weird to find some of these kind of hoity-toity film critics who really love the movie in that way, and he was basically saying I'd seen film after film after film for the past 3 days that was just boring, the same thing we've seen over and over again, and then you injected something that's so gonzo and weird that I can't help but admire every element of it.
Yeah, great opportunity to tell us we kind of already know our review of Repo Man. This would be required viewing in my film class. That's how important I think this movie is. It's interesting to note, and it's a lot of comparisons because Alex Koch made a dynamite first film, and then a lot of essays talk about Orson Welles with Citizen Kane and never got the fire. That comparison. And it's funny that Orson Welles, with his movie, was very intentional in what he wanted to do. This is kind of the opposite, where Alex Cox kind of had a loose kind of a thread of a plot.
Yeah.
It's very loose of a thread.
That makes sense when you think about Edge City, his previous short film, and that he shot 55 minutes of footage that when he tried to show it to people, they were like, I don't know what the hell this is for 55 minutes. And so, his idea then to cut it down and sell it as a short instead of add more insanity kind of shows you that the filmmaker that he was very fast and loose with the rules and very willing to sacrifice the parts of his vision that are less important to let other people try something new. And this is a movie that is 100% people trying something.
Right. Now, the basis for the plot is simply there's repossession jobs. But the punk aspect of it is pretty much thumbing your nose at everything that goes on. Punk is rebellion, right? And here's a guy who's going to conform into being a repossessor, which is the entire kind of the grunt work of maintaining a capitalist system. We'd let you have this if you just keep paying the payments. And if you stop, we're coming after you. And if once that breaks up, the whole structure breaks up, and you have this punk punk rock kid participating in being a Repo Man.
Yeah, he's doing the least punk thing you can do.
Right.
And he's kind of breaking the system, because even when he gets the repo code from Bud, Harry Dean Stanton's character, they end up breaking pretty much all of those rules across the film. Like, he's ending up basically kind of becoming this fissure.
I don't need a gun. I don't need to hijack a car. You did that.
Exactly.
You did that. Yeah. You lie to people. Emilio Esteta did that. There's interjections of little bit of themes of like society. You know, you have Duke.
Oh yeah.
Actually, played the part for Otto. He was actually auditioning and working to play Otto, but then he was given the role of Duke.
Mm-hmm.
But he blames society for his faults. And I like
and he like pauses like mid-death scene to let us know that like I have an issue. You know?
And it works to its level how you make everything look like a B movie. Everybody stands on their mark, and then they look like that intentionally bad acting.
Mm-hmm.
Otto, the grocery store guy, it is so clumsily shot, but it fits the movie.
Well, I think that there's a certain there's knowledge about like this is what we can afford to do, and I think if we're in on the joke, the audience will appreciate that. And I think it's one of the things I appreciated most about the film. I bought the film blind. I purchased this film not knowing a single damn thing about it. I honestly didn't even know any stars in the film. I just purchased it because it was a Criterion, and I thought the cover looked really cool. So
it's a cool cover.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'd never heard about the film until I was basically on this kick of going into Barnes & Noble and buying Criterions completely blank off the shelf. It's not a movie that is talked about, but the people who have seen it are all kind of part of the special club.
Yeah, and the interesting, if you look at a still of the movie, you think it's serious in its tone and its theme.
Yes.
But it's a parody. It's a comedy. Mm-hmm. Alex Cox doesn't think it's a parody. But we talked about Network, how that's a complete parody of what's just trying to talk about with society and, exploitation of media and film and how you use that. Here, this is definitely talking about your urban city problems. This is totally a city themed kind of a movie.
Oh yeah, we don't spend a lot of time in the main part of LA, but it's always in the background. It's always on display behind us. We're very aware of where we are.
And everybody not really looking to help other people. They're looking for people to benefit them. Even Otto's girlfriend, all of a sudden he leaves the bedroom and he takes his boyfriend. Takes his best friend. Harry Dean Stanton is looking for a partner to help him. Doesn't really care what you do, but the benefits for me, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the vessel for everybody is what can you do for me?
Yeah, and I think that was part of the time too, because Cox was very critical of kind of the time period itself, the Reaganomics of it all, the trickle down that was going on in society.
Not to mention the heighten of military.
Yeah. So we had elements of like, what can you do for me in this moment? What can I feed off of you to get me a little bit further in this dredge of a life? And that's why we slowly see those generic products come into play. At the beginning of the film, there's still quite a few on the shelves that are not generic, but they kind of become more generic overall because money got tighter as the film goes on. People are getting more and more unable to buy the brand names. Even the people like all the Repo Men, other than Otto, who are all named after beers. Like, they're literally like walking, talking commercials for beer. And yet, as the film goes on, they're forced to get the generic. They're forced to lose the brand name.
Yeah. It's difficult to kind of write and insert a conscientious character. And I would say Tracy Walter's character is very much like a conscientious character who speaks so these very much conspiracy theories kind of a thing, these cosmic or a consciousness. The world's full of consciousness and all this stuff. But it's almost like he's the only one that knows us. He's in this story. And of course, the very fitting ending to the story is the one that he's eligible, the one to transport, because he gets the whole subconscious of the film.
He understands what no one else is seeing in the narrative. And the funny thing about it, and the reason why I think that's an important character, is because he is conscientious, he is aware, but he's also not in the film very much. Basically showing us that we as the audience members are not even gifted enough to know until he deems us worthy as audience members to know what's going on. And that's why part of the glee that I get from this film is watching it with people who haven't seen it before, because watching it with them, you get to see that first time view through your eyes again of, I didn't know what the hell was going on through most of this. And I still don't when I watch it, but I know a little bit more every time.
Right. It's a movie that doesn't really make sense, but overall it has the most sense.
It's filmic sense. It's definitely not realism in any way, shape, or form, but it's filmic sense. From that very opening scene where you see the trunk door open, one of my favorite openings of any film ever, and then you cut to the little boots with like the rotting flesh inside of them.
Yeah.
You
and the first couple minutes of the movie,
you're in,
yeah, you got me hooked.
You know?
Yeah, you got me hooked. And then we don't see that car anymore. And then you talk about repossession. You're like, oh my God, that car is going to eventually be part of it. But no, then we go off to like a robbery.
And that makes sense with the multiple endings because the car wasn't initially going to be as big of a deal at one point, and that's why we don't see it very often. And then as the film went on, Universal started rejecting these endings. And so Alex Cox, I think he had at least 3 or 4 endings that were fully fledged ideas, not just kind of fixes. And had to really work around them all to make the studio happy, and the studio ultimately ended up shooting themselves in the own foot by not actually having confidence in the film.
One of the interesting side characters I really enjoy is the arc of Kevin. Because at the beginning he's working with Otto, and then Otto hates him, but they both get fired. Eventually he works at the car wash.
Yeah.
He gives this philosophy, maybe they're looking for jobs and all. 2 years I'll work in front and I'll be a manager. But then all of a sudden we pull the sheet over and then he's in the hospital for some reason.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all these wonderful journeys that you can insert in your own brain of what happened to Kevin throughout this whole aspect. Yeah.
There's so much more going on outside of the main narrative.
He always does it better than I do. Right.
One of the things that I didn't actually notice until this viewing, and I can't believe I missed it, was there's that whole conversation between Miller, Tracy Walter's character, and Otto about, you know, when you think of something like a plate of shrimp, and then someone says plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp, and then like later on in the film, there's a huge advertisement outside of one of the buildings for plates of shrimp.
Right, yeah. I didn't catch it till my 3rd time seeing this thing.
Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful way in which that the stories that are happening outside of the main story are equally as enjoyable and equally as subversive and
they get the right amount of exposure to it.
Yep.
This is not about product placements, but we'll make a joke about product placements. So you'll see them in every car, I swear, and then there's one dangling on the motorcycle for the cop.
It's a great one-line explanation for our product placement too. It's a great toying of the screenplay to fit your product placement. You hear today how people complain about product placement in films. This is one that had it so blatantly with one particular product, but they just picked a good product and they found a way to make it funny within the narrative itself. It's a brilliant way of going about it.
It has tragedy. It's hilarious. I don't know what's going on, but also this kind of makes sense to me. I don't know why.
Yeah. I think it succeeds where Rock and Roll High School is trying to get. I really enjoy Rock and Roll High School as a punk comedy high school film, but I think that film walks so that Repo Man can run. It's kind of a more distilled version of exactly what that group was looking for, and I think it fits the tone of all these elements. It is a great sci-fi picture. It is a great dystopian future. It's a great satire. Yeah. It's a great thriller. It's wonderful.
Yeah. If you haven't seen this, my God, you'll know exactly the temperament, the feelings, and the kind of where we're going aesthetically from 1984, which happened to the late 80s, which is escalation of just color, pop, explosion, everything.
Yeah.
Punk rock was kind of at the end. It's kind of weird. We always conceded Woodstock as the pinnacle of the 60s. It's kind of telling you it's over. This is Repo Man. It's kind of telling you that punk rock's kind of over. It from like 76 to 84 it was around. And then kind of just whimpers away, and then we have the hair bands.
Yeah, like punk rock kind of disappeared and then kind of re-grunged back into the 90s.
Kind of evolved, right? Like Green Day picked it up and something like that. Yeah.
But this was also a film that basically finally gave people who were part of that punk style something to cling to, something to be a part of.
And it's not really, it's very punk to be not punk.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Which is what Estevez is doing the whole film.
Yeah. I'm going to join the system just to thumb my nose at you guys who thumb your nose at the system.
Yeah.
That's punk.
Yeah.
All right. Have you seen it? My God, you should.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't just give you every single plot point. Hopefully you paused at some point, just went out and rented the damn movie. But if we told you everything, you're going to enjoy it either way. So go ahead and check out the film now. It's currently available to rent and purchase on a number of digital retailers.
Really? Because it's been hard.
It's not available to stream anywhere currently, but you can rent and purchase it in a number of places. Like I said, too, wait for the next Criterion sale and go pick up a physical version for yourself. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you guys for joining us so very much.
Sincerely, right.
Like Nick said, check out that Patreon down below. Definitely like and subscribe too. They're free things that can help support the channel. We're on the road to 500. We're almost there. Not really, but we're getting closer.
Yep.
So please like and subscribe. Tell your friends to watch the show. And you can find all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com. There's a little punk in every single review.
And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts, and you're ready to race in the aqueducts?